Now, in the third chapter, the king asked the third question. In fact, in this chapter, there are a few important philosophical and ontological ideas explained. The concept of creation in Vedanta, and then the concept of existence, dissolution, and a number of other topics. Though the Bhagavata is a Purana, but still it is supposed to be a book of great philosophical relevance because of its Vedantic approach in expounding different ideas. So here the king asked a question. He wants to know about the mystery of life and existence. What's the meaning of life? And what's the meaning of existence? And for that he asked the question, what is the nature of Maya? This concept of Maya is explained here. Maya is a very important theme in Vedantic tradition. If you analyze this word Maya, two letters, you'll understand what it implies. Ma and Ya. Ma actually is a term used to negate something. If you tell somebody, don't come here, say, Ma agacchude means don't come here. It's an imperative, don't come here. Or Ma gacchami, don't go there. So it implies negation, which means non-existence. Now, Ya is a pronoun in Sanskrit language, in Sanskrit grammar. Ya is used as a pronoun, very often in conditional clauses. So you don't use a pronoun to refer to something which really doesn't exist at all. And you don't use the word, the term Ma with regard to something, in relation to something which really exists. So that is the philosophical import of this particular term. So Ma implies non-existence, Ya implies existence. Ma cannot be used in relation to something which exists because it is negation. And Ya implies something which exists for all practical purposes. Because you use the word this, that, etc. in relation to something that we can see or hear, etc. Now, in other words, Maya is neither existence nor non-existence, or it is both existence and non-existence. Both can be used. So Maya is that which really doesn't exist. So it is not absolute reality. Maya is not an absolute reality. So it is not existence in the absolute sense. But then it is not non-existence in the absolute sense. Because you use the word Ya pronoun. So it means something which exists from the common sense point of view, from the relative point of view. Which means Maya means this world. This world is neither absolute non-existence, because we live in this world, we experience this world, we are part of this world. But it is not absolute existence, because it has a beginning, which means it did not exist before it began. And if it has a beginning, it has an end, which means it won't exist after it comes to an end. So the so-called existence is a stage, intermediary stage between its beginning and its end. So it is only relativity. It is only relative. So Maya is nothing but relativity. This point is being explained very elaborately in this chapter. But the approach is different. The third teacher, Kavi Hari Antariksha. Antariksha is the third teacher. He explains this not in relation to metaphysics or ontology, but he explains this in relation to our devotional life, spiritual life. That's the only difference. So here the nature of Maya is explained and how this relative world comes to be experienced in our day-to-day activities. That is being explained. So if you can just, I have just selected just a few verses only. The first one is this: Parasya Vishnoho Ishasya Mayiram api Mohini Mayam Vedidimichamo Bhagavantu Bhruvantuna. Means here. If you have got the verse before you, Parasya Ishasya Vishnoho Mayinam api Mohini Mayam Vedidimichama. So now we are, I rather not we, I want to know what exactly is the nature of Maya. Because Maya is explained in Vedanta as the tool, as the instrument which God uses to project this relative world. That is the function of Maya. So that is being explained. Now you can come to the 5th and 6th verses in the subsequent verses. So here, Gune Gunan Sabhujjana Atma Pradyotidai Prabhu Manyamana Idam Srishtam Atmana Mihasajjati Karmani Karmabhikurvan Sanimittani Dekhabhud Tattat Karmaphalam Grinhan Bhamadiha Sukhetaram. And again before that, Evam Srishtani Bhutani, that's 4th verse. Evam Srishtani Bhutani Pravishta Panchadhatu Bhihi Ekatha Dasadhatmanam Vibhajan Jushade Gunan. Now, here the third sage explains the absolute reality, Atman or Brahman, endures this mechanism. This mechanism means this human body or any living body. And living body has got three dimensions rather, 3 levels of existence. First one is the visible body, which is called Sthula Sharira, gross body. See, 5 senses of perception, eyes, ears, tongue, and so on. And 5 senses of action, leg, hands, feet, and so on. So these are the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action. And then we have got 5 elements of which this body is created. So total 15. And mind and intellect, 17. These 3 constitute something other than the physical body. So mind we can't see. Intellect also we can't see. So there is first of all this physical body that everyone can see. This gross body, the grossest dimension of human entity. Then there is the subtle body. And the subtle body consists of 17 factors I have already explained. One, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, 5 elements, plus mind and intellect. These are the 17 elements. Now, as I said this morning, there are certain inherent human characteristics which we all display. We can't behave in any other manner. Suppose you find yourself in a room surrounded by a number of books dealing with different topics. Nobody knows what we are doing. What book do we choose to read? What is the subject that our natural instinct takes us to or makes us interested in? That is our natural characteristic from a psychological point of view. What are the things in which we show a natural, inherent, instinctive interest? You are not a student studying in a school or university, where there are certain compulsions, academic responsibilities. But here you are reading something, or you are dealing with a subject in which you have full freedom either to study, to accept or reject. Or what are those instinctive activities in which we naturally get involved without any compulsion, without any responsibilities, or without any prompting? That should show you where you are interested in. Now, these characteristics are coming not from this life. Some of them may be related to this life. So many of them are coming from the previous life experiences. Now, whatever you have done in the past, not only in the last life, in any life, all these actions will leave a residue somewhere. And it is a compartment of the mind, or antakarana as we call it, internal organs. Technically it is called chittam, It's a department of mind, a compartment of mind. Actually, antakarana has got 4 compartments. Mind that speculates, that is mana, buddhi, intellect that decides, ego mechanism which identifies, and the memory system or chittam which accumulates the residual impressions of previous actions. Now, whatever we have done in the past, these impressions and these tendencies remain in subtle form, not in visible form, in subtle form in the chittam, or let us say mind. That's a simple way to put it. Technical terms I should try to avoid. Now, whenever we have an opportunity to come in contact with identical experiences in this life, what happens? These impressions and tendencies come to the surface, and they make us connect with the corresponding experiences which present themselves to us in this life. That's why if there is a talk going on Vedanta or some spiritual topics, there will be nothing entertaining about it. For those who are not interested, it's a terrible bore. But some people take deep interest in these things. They can't help it. There are much more entertaining things going all around, but they won't go there. That's because sometime in the past, these memories are stored in the chittam. So when you read a newspaper, there's a program going on somewhere, suddenly you decide to go there. Because those memories come to the surface, and then they make us connect with the corresponding identical experiences which are available to us right in front of us. So they connect. Which means there is a continuity. This continuity is possible not at the physical level, not the level of gross body, but it happens at the level of subtle body. The subtle body continues to be a repository of past events and memories. Now, you may very well ask a question. Among the subtle bodies, certain items are listed. 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception. These 5 senses of action will perish in this life, and also 5 senses of perception. But then, how can these memories be stored up in mind and continue to exist from birth to birth? The reason is, it is not the senses, it is not the activities of the senses that are preserved. It is the subtle memories or residual forms or impressions of actions which are stored in mind, which continue to exist, which go on rotating from life to life. So this, your hand or your eyes will come to an end with this life. But what you have seen with your eyes will keep its impression in the chittam. And those impressions will remain for a long time, till you get out of this body consciousness, till you get liberated from body consciousness. So what we have seen with our eyes, those visions we won't remember. But the impressions created by that act of seeing will remain. That's the idea behind. So in Vedantic psychology, they make a clear distinction. If you remember something with name and form, it refers to some experience in this life. If you remember something without name and form, in the form of an abstract, subtle idea, or a prompting or a tendency, then it is coming from previous life. Whatever you have experienced in this life, you will remember with name and form. See, if you have seen an elephant 10 years back, when you recollect, when the memory comes back to your mind, not only the idea, but also the shape and perhaps the name of the elephant also you may remember. But the idea of an elephant minus name and form, if it comes to your mind, which is very abstract, it comes from previous life. The point is this: the subtle body is a subtle mechanism. Gross body is the visible gross mechanism. Now, the subtle body continues to exist, and it goes through this wheel of cyclic existence: life, death, rebirth, and again activities prompted by the tendencies accumulated in this life, again death, again rebirth, and so on it goes. Gross body comes to an end. Now there is a fundamental cause for this rotation that is called karanasarya, it is called avidya, ignorance. Ignorance. What is ignorance? Ignorance of the fact that we are not this body. This we forget. We are ignorant of the fact of the truth that we are not these bodies, and we identify ourselves with this body. We are ignorant of the fact that we are the Atman, which is beyond body, which is beyond senses, beyond mind, beyond intellect, etc. So the fact that we are Atman is forgotten, and then the wrong notion that we are this body is projected. So this is the cause of this rotating wheel of samsara, we call it. Now the fundamental cause, as I said, is avidya or ignorance. This avidya is a dimension of Maya. If you ask the question, how Maya comes into existence, the answer is Maya doesn't come into existence. But then while you talk about it, the point is Maya is very much felt as a fact of our experience till we realize that Maya doesn't exist. We realize that Maya is something which really does not exist only when we realize that Brahman is only reality. Till we realize that Brahman is only reality, we think the relative world is only reality. Means Maya is only reality. So a man of, or a person of spiritual wisdom, a highly evolved soul, a liberated soul, looks at this world, he sees only Brahman or Atman or consciousness. But a person ignorant of this looks at the world, he sees only the world, doesn't see Atman. That's the only point of view. This idea is explained here from another angle. So, Srishti is explained. What is Srishti? Srishti in Vedantic concept means projection, not creation. When you use the word creation, it implies a coming into existence of something They did not exist earlier. But in reality, this visible world, name and form, all these are in fact, in reality, Atman itself. But because we associate this Atman with all these names and forms and plurality, we are able to see only the world and we are not able to see the Atman behind. A jnani may look at this world, stare at this world, and he will be seeing only Atman. An ignorant person looks at the world, he will see only this world, not Atman. So that's a basic difference. Now, how Vedanta explains this? Vedanta can easily tell you, well, this world really doesn't exist, it's only relativity, but people won't understand. So Vedanta comes down to the level of a common person, of an ordinary person, and ask him, you look around, see this visible world, what is its true nature? Vedanta asks you to look around, keep your eyes open and see the effect, see this world, and then analyze the nature of this world. And then when the spiritual seeker really understands this world, he understands that this world is only relativity. And then he realizes that Brahman is only world. I shall explain this in the light of an analogy which is used in Vedantic tradition. That will make things clear. Those who have been listening to Upanishad classes must have heard this at least 50, 60 times. For them it may be a repetition, but this point is very important. See, the famous analogy is the analogy of a rope and a snake. So there is a room which is not well lit. It's not pitch dark, but it is not well lit either. And there is an object lying on the floor which resembles a snake or maybe a stick, a curved stick, or a crack on the floor, or maybe a thin stream of water. According to your own tendencies, you may mistake that object for various things. When you bring light, what happens? You understand it is only a piece of rope. Now, what you saw previously as the snake is now recognized to be the rope. Not the rope and snake. What you mistook to be the snake is now recognized to be the rope. So, what happened to the snake? If you ask the question, the snake didn't go away anywhere because the snake didn't come there in the first place. But the snake was only a misunderstanding, a mistake of view. Okay, now if you ask the question, when was this world created? It is like asking the question, when did the snake come to the room? The snake came only when your mind projected the snake there. Instead of rope, you saw the snake. And then when you brought the light, that means when you realized the supreme truth, you understood that what you mistook to be the snake is really a piece of rope. Similarly, in Vedanta, our spiritual realization is just a kind of self-discovery. It is not gaining a new knowledge. It is only removal of wrong notions that we normally entertain with regard to what we are. When you bring the light, the person who thought it is a snake, his understanding is clear. He now realizes that it is rope. And another person must have mistaken it for a crack on the floor. He realizes that it is a rope. So crack on the floor, snake, all these things never existed because they never vanished. Similarly, the world in reality is nothing but relativity. You mistake this world to be real so long as you are not aware of the reality that Brahman is only reality. So, what is creation? creation is ultimately a projection. In Vedantic tradition, the manifestation of the subtle in gross dimension is creation. Remaining in that status is preservation, and the return of the gross to subtle form is dissolution. That's what the word, that's the only way we can explain the word. If you ask the question, where was this world before Big Bang? This world must have existed maybe in another condition before Big Bang. And again, after some time, the world, after some millions of years, if this world gets dissolved, it will certainly exist in another dimension. Dimension changes. That means there is no such thing as a creation or the coming into existence of something altogether new. It is a Vedantic concept. All these ideas are explained in this chapter. But from the devotee's point of view, the great sage says that God, Atman, endures the entire creation and becomes the immanent principle. And there is that immanent principle residing in everything in this world, the Atman. And when it endures these different bodies, then we are able to walk, we are able to talk, all the senses of action, senses of perception, mind, intellect, all these become active. When that consciousness leaves this body, then all these senses become inactive. They are rendered inactive. Something leaves the person, that person cannot walk or talk or think. When something exists in that person, he can think, he can act, he can behave. And the withdrawal of this consciousness from this body mechanism is called death. But the consciousness, it never vanishes. It goes into another body. It never vanishes. It never ceases to exist. It continues to exist. So you can find in the third verse, Ebhir bhudani bhudatma makabhudair makabhuja sasarjocha vajanayehi sumatratma prasiddhaye. Again, evam srishtani bhudani pravishta panchadhadubhihi. This in the fourth verse, if you remember, Sevam Panchadhadubhihi Srishtani Bhutani. The entire creation is created out of the 5 elements. Then what happens? And then Ekatha Dashatha. Ekatha means mind, 10 indriyas, 10 senses of 10 senses of human behavior. That is 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception. Mind. So all these different entities in human body suddenly become active. They start interacting with the external world when this consciousness enters this body mechanism. This gross body suddenly becomes active when the consciousness Atman enters. The Pravishtaha means having entered. So when this consciousness or Atman enters the body mechanism, all senses of action and senses of perception become active. How do they act? Depending upon the memories and tendencies and impressions gathered in previous life. How our eyes function depends upon our culture, our character. But the eyes are there, that's common for everyone. But the way a person uses his eyes depends upon his own culture, his own inherent culture, and this culture is the sum total of all impressions and tendencies that the person has accumulated in previous life. So you have to remember, in Vedanta, we are trying to analyze the fundamental cause, starting the inquiry with the effects. From effects, we trace the final cause of the world. But in most popular religious traditions, we just project a God who sits somewhere in many of the other Puranas also. In many of the traditional Puranas, like Brahmavaivarta Purana, so many other Puranas are there. Just like monotheistic theological works you find. The God is projected as creating this world on a particular day or over a period of time. One after another, God creates different beings in this world. That is not the approach in Vedantic tradition. That's not the approach in Bhagavata Purana. There, you are taken to be a spiritual seeker. You look around, you analyze this world. From where does this world come? What is its origin? How does it function the way it functions? And what is going to be its destiny? What will happen to its future? These ideas are analyzed from a philosophical point of view. So, from effect, you begin your inquiry and you are going in search of the cause. You don't just posit somebody sitting on a fine day and creating this world. No. That such ideas are there in the Puranic literature, but not in Bhagavata Purana. Now, the idea that this Atman is present as the immanent principle in all living beings in this world, this is the idea. But the Purana has got a peculiar way of putting it. So if you read the fourth verse, see, Evam Sushtani Bhudani Pravishta Panchadhadubhi. Panchadhadubhi means 5 elements. So all these things are created and then Atman endures, God endures these elements. Here the word God is used, but here the meaning is Atman. So having created this world, the Lord endures this world. The idea that the divine principle is the immanent residing reality in all beings is put in another language. The language is different. God endures the world and becomes one with it. Ekatha dashadhatmanam vibhajan jushade guna. And then according to the previously experienced tendencies and impressions, different human beings work and function in this world. This is how creation is being explained. So, the previous tendencies, which are remaining in certain form, suddenly become gross when they start functioning through the 5 senses of action and 5 senses of perception. The Linga Sharira, which is called the subtle body. As I said, in a subtle body consists of 17 elements. Mind and intellect, buddhi and mana, plus 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception, and 5 fundamental elements. So, these subtle bodies, they retain their previously acquired tendencies and impressions, and these impressions and tendencies start re-experiencing, reliving in the present body. So in the 6th verse you find this mystery of creation is being explained further. We'll come to another subject after this. Karmani karmabhi kurvan sanimittani dehabhrit tattat karmabhalam grinhan brahmadeha sukhetaram. This means here. So see the 6th verse. Karmani karmabhi kurvan sanimittani dehabhrit. Dehabhrit means somebody who is bearing this body. Tattat karmabhalam grinhan brahmadeha sukhetaram. So having acquired all these tendencies, impressions and characteristics of the last several lives, we are born in this world, we are endowed with senses of action, senses of perception, mind, intellect, everything. How do we function? The way we function is determined by the tendencies, inherent tendencies and impressions that remain accumulated in the mind. Accordingly we act. That is the idea behind. So this 6th verse is an important description of the mystery of the creation, life as it goes on in this world. Otherwise, how do you explain the mind-boggling plurality or diversity of human beings, a single family, the same parents may have five children with five totally different characteristics. Even if they are given identical education in the same school, and if they are brought up in the same home, under the same environment, still they develop five entirely different characteristics. Why? Because they represent five different subtle bodies, accumulated tendencies and impressions which they have brought from their previous life. So this is the idea behind it. Then what is our relationship with this life? This is explained in the same Purana. There is a story that will make the picture clear. The mystery of rebirth. So a king didn't have children for a long time, and then he prayed to God. He did a lot of penance, and then his queen gave birth to a son, and he became a brilliant prince. And the king had declared that this prince will be the heir apparent, and the coronation ceremony was about to start. That day this prince died. So it was a terrible blow to the royal couple and also all the courtiers and the whole kingdom. So they were crying and weeping, the parents. At that time a great sage, one of the sages like Narada, came there, and he told his royal parents, see, why do you worry? You have studied Vedanta. Intellectual study won't help you, because the intellectual level mind is somewhere else. So they were crying and weeping. So they could not be consoled. And then, well, I shall just show you what it is. And he brought the prince back to his life. So he had some occult spiritual powers and sprinkled some water, and the prince came alive. As he was in deep sleep, he suddenly got up. So then the great sage told him, look here, your parents are crying and weeping, your relations are crying and weeping, why don't you console them? Then the prince asked, which parents? I have thousands of parents lining up in previous life. So who are you talking about? Who are these? To which birth do they belong? So that was a terrible blow to the parents who were crying and weeping. The same son, the prince, suddenly gets up and says, I don't recognize them. Then they understood Narada was speaking sense, and they were consoled. This story behind. So this is the reality. So the senses, the impressions, all these are continuing in the rotation. Only the physical dimension of the senses functioning, but the subtle tendencies accumulated by actions involving the senses will remain accumulated in mind. They will remain potent for endless lives till the person realizes that he is not the body, he is the Atma. This is the idea behind. This being explained here in the 6th verse. Now we will come to the next question. I think, yes. Next question is you can look at the 17th verse of 3rd chapter. So, Antariksha, the third sage, gave a brief description of the mystery of existence and life. Now, the king asked another question. How can one transcend this Maya? How can one get out of this cycle of life, death and rebirth? When does this cycle come to an end? This is the question. Now, before going further, I shall explain this because we may not have enough time. There are two approaches here. One approach is from the standpoint of devotional philosophy. The other is from the standpoint of Vedantic philosophy. From the standpoint of devotional philosophy, if a sincere spiritual seeker surrenders himself completely to God, that very second he comes out of this cycle of samsara, cycle of life, death and rebirth. The example, classic example is Girichandra Ghosh himself, whom we referred to this morning. Now, if a spiritual seeker completely surrenders himself to God, and if the surrender is sincere, that very moment he gets out of the shackles of cyclic existence, means life, death and rebirth. And there are 6 important characteristics of this complete self-surrender. They are not explained in this text, of course they are hinted at, but it was philosophically developed by a great philosopher of Vaishnavite philosophical tradition, the qualified non-dualist Ramakrishna Order. So he says there are 6 characteristics which are very important in this philosophy of self-surrender. The one, that the seeker or devotee should be fully established in positive tendencies and impressions. It means his mind and intellect should be filled with ideas helpful to spiritual life, conducive to spiritual life. He should deliberately, consciously work to feed his mind with spiritually elevating ideas, theistic ideas. And simultaneously, he should try to avoid all negative ideas, ideas which may create confusion, which may shake his faith in God or faith in spiritual tradition. The first one is called in Sanskrit Anukulyasya Sankalpaha. The second one is Pratikulyasya Varjana. The first one, a person, a spiritual seeker, should be fully established in ideas and concepts which are helpful in spiritual life. And simultaneously, he must work to avoid all negative tendencies. Then, he must have a strong conviction that God will protect him. That is a third condition. The fourth one is, he must look upon God as the sole protector. The fifth one is, he must surrender himself and his whole life completely at the feet of God without any second thought. Sixth one, he should have a kind of total detachment towards his bodily comforts, towards his physical comforts, and all these which stand in the way of spiritual life. Those who are interested, the verse is this: Anukulyasya Sankalpaha, Pratikulyasya Varjanam, Rakshasiriri Vishwasaha, Goptrutta Varanam Tatha, Atmaniksheva Karpanne, Sadvidha Saranagati. Saranagati means total self-surrender. In fact, even in Christian tradition, the idea of confession and the concept of God, Jesus purging the sins of mankind was actually based on this idea. If you study this Sharanagati, Prabhati tradition, Vedanta, and then study those books, then only you can see the striking parallel, similarity. The idea of taking refuge in Jesus is nothing but a kind of self-surrender, concept of self-surrender, which is very close to similar ideas found in Narada Bhakti Sutras and other devotional literature. Because what happens when you place yourself under under the power of a superior sublime spiritual entity, what happens is your own entity, your own individuality gets expanded. And then a higher spiritual power starts functioning through you, and you start functioning as an instrument in the hands of a higher spiritual power. In fact, this is the real psychological explanation of the very idea of surrender in all religious traditions. The difference is, in Vedantic tradition, in Vedantic devotional tradition, this science has been developed and expounded by countless numbers of great philosophers and sages, but in other traditions, perhaps it was not so systematically developed. That could be the reason. So this is one method. The other method is Vedantic method, where you use your reason and your power of self-analysis. Am I this body? Am I this mind? Am I these external things which come and go? Or am I something beyond all this? External things are changing every moment, fleeting. And then the senses which interact with the external things cannot be absolute spiritual entities. Mind also, because mind also fluctuates every moment. Intellect also fluctuates. So there should be something beyond external things, beyond the senses which interact with the external objects, beyond mind, beyond intellect, beyond all this. There should be a supreme consciousness which is eternal. This idea is explained in Vedanta. And this Vedantic method again has got several divisions. I won't go into those details. So these are the two methods explained here. Now, at the very beginning, Prabhupada, the fifth sage, you remember the verse, Kavir Hari Andariksha Prabhupada Pipalayana, is the fourth verse, fourth sage, fourth one. He explains the misery of the external world in the 18th verse. Karmani arabhamananam dukkhatte sukhayecha pasyit pakavipadyasam midhinicharinam dranam, etc. You find nityatidena vittena dullabhena atmamurtvina grhapatyaptavashubhikka predisyanideshchalehi. I won't go into those details. The idea is this: the misery of external world, the misery of those who look upon these external things as an end in themselves. Those who believe that to enjoy the world is the supreme goal of human life. Their life is steeped in eternal misery. This is the idea which Prabhupada wants to drive home here. And then we will come to a very important topic, that is the fifth question. You can come to 34th verse of 3rd chapter. 34th verse of 3rd chapter. This is one of the most important questions here. So this is verse number 34, 3rd chapter. Here, the king is asking some very important questions from a Vedantic perspective. What is the nature of Brahman? So you can see what all questions he asked. First, he asked, what are the principles of righteousness and morality that one should practice in this age? What are the characteristics of those who have reached a very high level of spiritual evolution, devotional evolution? And then, what is the nature of Maya? And then, how to transcend Maya? Such questions have been asked and the subjects discussed elaborately. Now, fifth question. The question is this: Narayana abhidhanasya brahmana paramatmanaha nishtam arharka no vaktum yuyam hi brahmavittama. This is the question. The idea is this: what is the true nature of Brahman? Here, of course, this is a devotional classic in which Vedantic ideas are expounded in a very graphic style. That is the uniqueness of this particular classical work. So the king asked the question, what is the true nature of Brahman, which is also called Narayana? See, Narayana, the word is not just a proper name. Naranam ayanam yasya. This is Narayana, Sanskrit, that's etymology. What is the supreme goal of human beings? That's the meaning of Narayana. Narayana is not just a name. The etymological meaning is, the meaning of the word Narayana is the supreme goal, the supreme spiritual destination of all human beings. That is the meaning of the word Narayana. So Narayanam ayanam gati yasya, means the idea behind. What is the supreme goal of human existence, human aspirations? What is the highest spiritual goal of all human aspirations? That's the question. Please explain that to me. In answer to this question, the 35th verse says Pippalayana answers the question. This is a fifth stage. The sloga is this: Kabir Hari Andariksha Prabuddha Pippalayana. This is the fifth verse, fifth stage. So he answers. First he says, this Brahman is the origin of this universe. This Brahman is the preserving principle of the universe. This is the Brahman which sustains this universe. And it is this Brahman which ultimately, or in which the world gets dissolved. This Brahman is the reality in which this world ultimately gets dissolved. This idea behind. So, sthidudbhavat pralaya hetuhu aheturasya yat jagra swapna sushuptishu sad vibhahischa. This needs some explanation. Sthiti means the status of the world existing as such. Srishti means projection. As I said, Srishti is not creation, Srishti is projection. Because if you use the word creation, it could imply the coming into existence of something from a state of non-existence, which is logically an impossibility. Nothing can come out of nothing. No entity can come out of nothing. So, if the reality exists before it really came into existence, that reality can never be created. It always exists. So, what we normally call creation is nothing but manifestation of the subtle in gross form. And when the gross form goes back to the subtle form, it is called dissolution. And that when the gross form continues to exist for some time in the gross dimension, it is called existence. That's the idea behind. So here Pippalayana says this Brahman is the fundamental cause, the final cause of this world. That means it is from Brahman that this world originates, and it is in Brahman that this world exists, and it is in Brahman that this world gets dissolved. So the world, you can say, has got a cause. In the sense, Brahman is the cause. But Brahman has no cause. It is uncaused cause. So that word is aheturasya. See, hetu ahetu means the world has got a cause because it is caused by Brahman. It originates from Brahman. It exists in Brahman. But Brahman itself doesn't have a cause. If you say Brahman is caused by something, then that cause should be defined the absolute reality, not Brahman. So the sage says this Brahman is the hetu, means the fundamental, the final cause of origination, existence and dissolution of the universe. Well, how do you explain? Suppose you want to manufacture some pots and pans from clay. Just think of it. What you call pots and pans is nothing but clay plus name and form. Otherwise, it is clay only. See, when the pot maker turns the clay, or a goldsmith, when a goldsmith turns gold into ornaments, what really happens? He just adds two things to gold. One is name, the other is form. It has got a form, so it has to be distinguished from other forms. So you call it ring, necklace, or whatever it is. So it has got a form, therefore it needs a name. But actually it is gold only. Before the goldsmith manufactured these ornaments, it was gold. And when he melts it, then also it is gold. So when you are wearing it in your neck, then also it is gold. But you cannot wear a chunk or piece of gold. So for that you need a form. And because it has got a form which distinguishes it from other forms, it has got a name also. You need a name because you have to distinguish it from other things. So otherwise, there is no distinction between a gold biscuit and also the necklace that you are wearing. Actually, before the goldsmith made these ornaments, it was gold. So, and when he melts it, then also it is gold. And when you are wearing it, then also it is gold only. So where is necklace? Where is ring? It doesn't exist. It exists only because you associate name and form. That's all. Name and form comes and goes. It's not eternal reality. When you melt it, it takes another name, another form, and then it needs another name. So it comes and goes. It changes. So what changes can never be eternally true. In Vedanta, there are three criteria to be fulfilled for anything to be called absolutely real, eternal. One is that it should be the same in the past, in the present, and in future. There is nothing in this world which is the same in the past, in the present, and in future. The world also. Maybe 13 billion years back, it did not exist. Before Big Bang, it was something else. After Big Crunch, it will be something else. So the world that we see is only maybe a matter of few millions of years. So it is not eternal. Maybe as an insect comes into existence for a few minutes, the world exists for a few millions of years. Both are equally unreal. Both are equally relative. Both are equally within Maya. This is a Vedantic perspective. So, your ornament is real as gold, but it is unreal as ornament. So, a pot made of clay is real as clay, but unreal as a pot, because the pot comes and goes, but clay never goes, changes, remains the same. So, here the Tattwamayana says, this Brahman is ahetu, means it is never, it is not the effect of anything. It can never be the effect of anything. It is a cause of everything. Generally, when we talk about things as being effect and cause, the cause of something may be the effect of something else. And that entity may be the effect of something else. But Brahman is the one reality which never originated because it always existed. And because it never originated, it will never cease to exist. So it always exists. So Pippalada says it is ahetu, uncaused cause. At the same time, it itself is the cause of creation, preservation, and dissolution of everything in this world. That is the, of course, few minutes, then we'll continue tomorrow. Next verse is Yad Swapna Jagara Sushuptishu Sat. Sat means absolute reality. It remains the same in the waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. This I will discuss. It needs some elaborate description. So tomorrow we'll continue this. We won't be able to deal with all the 9 questions and answers, but this is very important that we'll discuss tomorrow. And now we can ask some questions. If there is any clarification required, we shall try to explain. We have got about 25 minutes.
Maharaj, we talked about the past tendencies and experiences. Is this the pure mind that carries, or is the tool or the instrument?
Oh yes, I use the mind and intellect. In fact, I shall explain a little more. It is called a set of 4 internal organs. It's called antakaranam. It's called internal organs. Antakaranam. Antakaranam has got 4 departments, 4 components. One is mind. Mind is something which speculates. When you see an object from a distance, you are not sure what it is, then your mind goes on speculating within, whether it's a name of, whether it's a person, human being, or pillar, or whatever it is. When you come near the object, you come to decide. You come to determination as to what that object is. So your buddhi, your intellect functions. When you try to identify yourself as X or Y or Z who has seen the same object the previous week, then your aham or ego identity functions. When you suddenly remember, I saw the same pillar last month, then the memory that is accumulated in your chittam, which can be called a compartment of these internal organs, it starts functioning. So these tendencies are accumulated in one department of antakarana, of which mind is just one component, one department. So, but if you need to go into such details, so you can say it is preserved in mind. That will do better. That will make other things will become more complicated.
The question I asked is because of another reason, Maharaj. We always favored the pure mind.
So I will explain that. There is, really speaking, there is no such thing as a pure mind, because mind, when it is completely free from all tendencies, it is no more mind. In fact, mind itself is a function of tendencies and impressions. So if your mind is completely emptied of all these tendencies and impressions, it is one with Atman. So pure mind and Atman are the same. That's why the scriptures sometimes declare pure mind alone can realize the Atman, because pure mind is nothing but Atman itself. Because mind or mana is defined as sankalpa vikalpatmika antakarana vritti. Means it is nothing but the name of function of a particular set of tendencies and impressions. When a particular set of tendencies and impressions function in a particular manner, it is called mind. If those tendencies and impressions cease to exist, then there is no more mind. That mind is the same as Atman. So Ramana Maharshi once said, when your mind is turned inward, it is Atman. But mind can never be turned inward, then it is no more mind. Mind's very nature is, it is always being dragged by the 5 senses towards external objects. That is how mind actually functions. Otherwise, there is no mind. So, if one can completely free his mind from all tendencies and impressions, then he can immediately realize his true nature. It feels completely free from all tendencies. He becomes calm and quiet. It's not. That's the idea. In Vedanta, we call it purity of mind, chitta shuddhi it is called. In the yoga, it is called yoga, it is called. That's I see. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, it is called. Chitta vritti means chitta vritti nirodha means cessation of the impressions and tendencies of mind. When they cease to exist, then it is as then you have realized the supreme goal. Please.
So, Swami, if the gold goes back, this bracelet is not really existed, only the gold is fully exists now. What about the idea of the bracelet and the form?
Oh yes, if gold alone exists and then there's names and forms do not exist, that's a question. Is it so?
Yeah, so
Yes.
The form must also be eternal then.
Yes. No, that's right. Names and forms are only relative. They are not non-existent. They are relative. This is a point, remember. In Vedanta, there are three levels of reality. The absolute non-existent things, which we cannot even conceive of, even intellectually. Then the relative things, which we think of, but the relativity of those relative entities will be realized. The fact that they are not absolute will be realized only when you realize the absolute. So, the idea of name and form does exist at the relative level. So, but from the standpoint of a goldsmith, if you go to a goldsmith and I think you are referring to that, is it so? You are referring to that analogy?
Which analogy?
The gold and ornaments?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if you go to a goldsmith, he may not bother much about the different shapes and sizes of the different ornaments that you are going to sell to him. He will judge those things only on the basis of the quality of the gold and the weight of the gold. So far as he is concerned, names and forms do not matter. Similarly, when you transcend names and forms, then you just go beyond them. Names and forms are not absolutely non-existent. They are not absolutely real. They are not absolutely existent, but they are not absolutely non-existent. That's the idea behind. Unless there is the idea of name and form, you cannot superimpose name and form on gold.
Right.
So they do exist at a relative level. Another example, when I used the analogy of the rope and snake, the snake idea is there. You have seen a snake in the zoo or in the forest. And when you see the rope lying in the semi-lit room, you mistake the rope for the snake. If the snake never exists anywhere, then you will not superimpose it on the rope. The only point is the snake doesn't exist there. So, snake is not completely non-existent. It's possible for the snake to exist as an idea because it is real at the relative point of view. In the relative world, it is real. So, what is relative is called Vyavahari and Vedanta. What is absolute is called Paramarthika. The absolutely real, when you realize the absolutely real, then the relative realities won't be recognized as real. When you are not aware of the absolute reality, then you mistake the relative to be the absolute.
But don't the ideas, the design of the relative realities have to exist in the absolute as well?
The idea of the absolute reality.
And the ideas that exist in the relative reality must also exist in the absolute, otherwise they couldn't exist in the relative.
Yes, in fact, the absolute reality is not an idea. It is an intuitive experience. That is why all the Upanishads finally proclaim this reality cannot be explained as an idea, as a word, or as a philosophical doctrine. Philosophical doctrines, all books are only attempts to explain what is beyond explanation. The Upanishads themselves say. So, the Vedas themselves declare the supreme reality is a matter of intuitive experience which cannot be explained in words, but Upanishads only try to remove wrong notions that we have got with regard to the absolute reality. The real idea, the real experience can and should come only by its own.
I guess what I'm asking is that Plato has this idea of concept of ideas or ideals that exist.
Ideas and ideals. Oh, ideal is something different. Ideas are different. Ideal is a principle. Idea is there are millions of ideas related to millions of different objects in this world. Ideals are different. What I wanted to drive home was the name and form. That's what you are asking about. Names and forms do exist as ideas, and they are real from the relative point of view, but only from the relative point of view. They are not real from the absolute point of view. But the fact that they are only relative will become clear to us only when we go beyond them and realize the absolute. So long as we are not aware of the true nature of the absolute, we mistake the relative for the absolute. That's what really happens. Yes. No question, Doctor.
So, what happened to the sage, Swami, who was so tortured by his memories and the senses that he put out his eyes?
Yes, in fact, in some of the scriptures they say one can divert the five senses of perception and mind towards spiritually elevating activities and ideas that will sublimate these tendencies. These tendencies cannot be neutralized. These tendencies, if there are negative tendencies, harmful, disturbing tendencies and impressions in mind which come to the surface, creating problems, it torments people. Now, what to do? We cannot arbitrarily neutralize them, but their strength and their disturbance can be reduced by accumulating positive tendencies. So that the positive tendencies, when they get accumulated in mind, will reduce the strength, weaken the negative tendencies. That's Patanjali also recommends the same thing, devotional philosophy also. So if a person is tortured by negative impressions and tendencies and impressions, then one method is to divert his attention or her attention towards creative activities, spiritually beneficial activities, which will bring in positive impressions and tendencies that will weaken the negative tendencies. That's the idea behind. So divert the senses of perception and mind into creative channels. That's what they do. In fact, this loud singing of devotional songs and then all these highly vocal manifestations of devotional practices are recommended for people who are highly disturbed emotionally. So you can find even in ISKCON and all that, I've seen people with strong violent tendencies, when they violently indulge in dancing and sing bhajans, suddenly there's an effect, there's a soothing effect on their mind. So, but people who are naturally calm and quiet should not indulge in those things. But people who are naturally violent and hyperactive, instead of being hyperactive in the wrong areas, in the undesirable areas, they better divert their energy and attention towards creative things. This kind of dancing or bhajans or writings. Sometimes in psychiatry, people with some ability that encourage to divert their attention and energy into creative channels. Same works here also.
Yes, they call it cognitive.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
Yes.
Substitute positive ideas for negative ideas.
Yes. You have seen people who, those who waste their time and while away their time, loafers, such people will be encouraged. You work for the YMCA or philanthropic organizations or Red Cross or maybe for temple construction or church organizations, some kind of charitable activities, that will help them to divert that extra surplus energy and time into creative channels. That will have a soothing effect in their character. At a higher level, they may turn to less vocal forms of devotional practices.
Right, the first thing you explain is violent activities. This is being experimented in the jails here.
Yes.
One Vidyut Chatterjee, Vidyut Bose, devotee, he is teaching yoga, meditation in the prisons. And there is a transformation, and some of them have given up and then they have become good citizens, it appears.
Yes.
Swami, you made a statement which probably for a lot of people here is probably not unique, but for me, you said that like Vedanta is explored from a point of a spiritual seeker, right, in terms of that. So when you actually look at it that way, it's the same with Buddhism also, right? Like it's like you're exploring and then you're coming to in Vedanta, obviously the supreme reality is expounded to a great extent, whereas in Buddhism, it's not. So,
in Buddhist tradition, creation is not explained the way it is done in theistic religions or Puranas. No. See, there is no description of the world by a God, because there is no God at all. So, but the mystery of human existence is very graphically explained on the basis of the concept of Trishna and then Pratitya Samutpada, all this, the dependent origination and all that. But the creation of this world is not explained the way it is done in Genesis or the Puranic literature or anything. The point is, in Vedanta, the approach is somewhat different. From a rational point of view, an inquiry is made into the cause of the world, which is conceived as the effect of the fundamental cause. So there you start your inquiry from cause to effect, towards effect. But here the inquiry is from effect to the cause. What is the nature of this world? Why this plurality? Why this diversity? What could be the mystery behind? What could be the nature of reality from which the entire world originates? That's being explained in this 35th verse that we are going to deal with maybe tomorrow. Yes. Just a few more minutes, otherwise I will conclude.
So, Swami, so you're talking about the projection theory of Maya, right? In various other books like Panchadasi or some of the other books, there are other theories of Maya where space, light and causation.
Yes, that is there. But the basis is this projection. The world that we see is nothing but the manifestation of the subtle in gross form. That is common everywhere through Vedantic tradition. And then when the subtle appears in relation to name and form, the world is experienced. So, for a great liberated Vedantin, for a liberated soul, he can live in this world or she can live in this world, look at this world, still not see the world, but see Brahman only. That is the idea. Sarvam Khalidam Brahman. These ideas are given in the Upanishad literature. So that's the idea began. So there is a view, Nama Rupa Drishtya Mithya, Surupa Drishtya Brahman. This world is Brahman itself when you don't see it in association with name and form. When you look at Brahman through the prism of name and form, it is seen to be the world. When you look at the world without the association of name and form, the world itself is recognized to be Brahman itself. That's the idea. That's why Surupa Drishtya Brahma Eva, Nama Rupa Drishtya Mithya. This meaning here. Okay. So now we'll conclude. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Darshan Sri Ramakrishna.